Brad, thank you for joining me here today to discuss AB 665, which was recently passed. Now, could you start with a brief overview of what's your thoughts on this bill?
Yeah, this is a horrific bill when it comes to parental rights and undermining the rights of parents. What it says is it's going to change the law to allow counselors, mental health counselors, possibly like a school counselor, for example, to take a child and put the child over the age of 12, has to be over the age of 12 or over, and put that child into a mental health residential facility without parental consent. Now, right now, under the law, in order for this to be done, there has to be reports of incest or an immediate threat to the child's health or safety, that they're likely going to try to commit suicide or harm themselves physically or mentally. Right now, that's what has to be shown and before a child can be taken and put into a mental health facility without parental consent. This obliterates those qualifiers and gives tremendous latitude for a mental health counselor to be able to take a child away from the parents, put them in this residential mental hospital for youth, and the parents have no say in the matter. Due process is out the window.
Could you talk about how this would impact communities and families in California?
Yeah, basically what this does is it puts a cloud of fear over moms and dads up and down the state of California, just knowing that at any time they could lose their child. And specifically, this legislation is targeting those children who might have same-sex sexual attraction issues or confusion or gender identity confusion. This is what it's really targeting, so that a counselor can simply take the child away from the family under the grounds that the parents have maybe traditional religious beliefs and convictions, and therefore are an inherent danger or concern for the child, even though they're not having to prove anything or show any evidence. Presently, under California law, in order for a child to be taken from a home, then by a social worker, there has to be a showing of a reasonable suspicion of abuse or neglect against the child by the parents. This throws that out. No longer. If you can show that that child is potentially not affirmed in terms of their sexuality or gender identity confusion, you can lose your child. That is what this brings to the table. It's basically a legalized kidnapping. When you take a child without any reasonable due process, without any actual imminent threat of harm to the child to justify it, that's kidnapping. That's why many people refer to this as the kidnapping bill of California.
Now, what can parents do in terms to, claim custody or bring their children back?
Well, first off, if any parent at any time sees this as a pending threat of risk or harm, potentially with regard to their child, they should not hesitate to contact Pacific Justice Institute. The fact is, David, we are looking right now for plaintiffs who can show that they have a risk or a harm that they may lose their child has some mental issues, some emotional issues that could in some way justify them losing their child under this legislation. So I encourage parents in that situation to contact us at PJI. I also encourage parents to download our very important parental resources called 12 Steps to Protect Your Children from CPS or social workers. It's available without charge on our website, pji.org, pji.org. We have other great resources there empowering parents as well. But parents need to understand, things are not the same. And particularly in states like California, blue states predominantly, parents do not have the rights of due process that they think they do, and they can easily have their children taken. And this legislation will be an incentive, mark my words, for more and more parents to say, enough of California, I'm moving to Texas or Tennessee or Florida or somewhere else that is more respectful of the rights of parents.
Since we're also talking about different states, what are the national implications that this California legislation could have on other states?
Well, right now in California, we have already passed legislation that allows, it's similar kidnapping protection legislation that allows a kidnapper, say from California, to go to Texas, go to another state, say to a family in Dallas, and to be able, they could kidnap that child and take that child to California without the parents knowing, the legal guardian knowing. And that kidnapper, under California law, will be protected from any criminal prosecution for the kidnapping if it can be shown that the reason they kidnapped the child was to enable the child to undergo a gender transformation, to become a transgender, to change, to quote unquote change their gender. Now, genetically, that's impossible. You cannot genetically change any cell to say something different with regard to your gender. But as far as cutting off body parts, getting injected with drugs or hormones, that's what we're talking about here to a minor child by a kidnapper. And that protects the kidnapper from being prosecuted, and the parents have no right to see the child or even the medical records of the child to know what body parts were cut off and what was injected into their son or daughter. It is horrific. It's a clear violation of the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution.
How about the child's role in all of this?
Well, first, I want to make it really clear. We're talking about a child, a minor. And the law basically says, generally speaking, minors are not to be given whatever they want. In fact, studies show that if a children with gender identity dysphoria is simply just left alone and not encouraged to have the confusion, just left alone, more than 90% of them will no longer even have that confusion by the time they graduate from high school. And so that's how fluid children are, and yet we're allowing third parties, potentially strangers, to be able to kidnap a child simply because at that moment they have those feelings, and that's all that's needed to violate the rights of parents and to permanently sterilize and tragically traumatize a child for many, many years to come.
Brad, thank you so much for your time. It's great having you on the show.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. Take care.